Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome to another You Be the Behavior Consultant. Just making oh, there I am. Yay. Got my audio going, so we are good to go. And what are we talking about today? We are talking about creating behavior change plans. This is sort of a continuation of what we were discussing last week, but we're going to focus on some case studies so we get to be very interactive, get to have some fun, and look at some video examples. So we're going to get right into it so that we don't delay. And of course, for the newbies, I'm going to explain what we're doing here. This is You Be the Behavior Consultant, a live stream I try to do every Monday. And how does it work? I present a topic for discussion, and then this one we're not going to go so much into some specific discussion questions right away, because we're just going to get right into the topic because it's pretty interactive right from the get-go. And of course, I'll recap everything at the end. So as I mentioned from at the beginning there, if you logged in right away on time, we are going to talk about creating behavior change plans, and we're going to do some case studies today. So I've got some video examples. I do have 3 lined up, but I'm going to be attentive to the time. So if we start to go over time, we may not get through all 3, but we'll try. And this is going to be an opportunity for you to practice your skills, applying your knowledge, all that fun stuff based on what we've gone over in previous live streams. And, and again, even if you haven't been here at the previous live streams, you may already have experience doing all this kind of stuff. But it's especially relevant to what we went over in our last live stream, the one called Solving Behavior Problems by Asking More Questions. And I know where people are just starting to log in. I haven't given you a whole lot of time to log in. So while people are logging in, we will do a little bit of a review before we hop into our case studies. And that'll give people a few more people time to hop in so that we've got some folks here to get in on the discussion. All right, so just to review a little bit, so last time what we talked about is basically what's in that Big for Animals. If anybody's ever been to that document that we had a nice team of people work on and put together, which stands for Behavior Intervention Guidelines, and it's really focused on effective, efficient, and optimal interventions. And in that document, which is at bigforanimals.com if you want to check it out, we really kind of talk you through the steps of how you do a behavior intervention. And when we say intervention, it's really more about any kind of change procedure. So it can be whether you're addressing an undesired response or if you're trying to create a behavior training plan for a new behavior. So you describe the behavior in question, whether it's an undesired behavior or a goal behavior. And then we're going to talk about what occasions the behavior. So the who, the what, the when, the where. And then we're also going to talk about the many possible contingencies and their outcomes that may impact the behavior. So again, the last live stream that we did really goes a deep dive into those questions, kind of using a specific example, another case study. But then we're going to do that process again. And hopefully this time we're going to look at an undesired response, a new goal behavior, and then if we have time, we'll look at a situation in which a behavior is maybe kind of on the edge of breaking down and how we might look at addressing that. So hopefully we got enough people here to do a little discussion on an undesired response. And I'm going to give you a little background. So again, this is really kind of like if you are the behavior consultant and you come into a facility and someone says, I got this problem, can you help me? And here we go. So in this particular example, we've got a blue-crowned pigeon, and it's doing this wing slapping behavior, this undesired response of slapping people. And it's and just to give you some background, it's an imprinted mature blue-crowned pigeon, and the undesired response we're seeing is it's slapping people with its wings. And I'm going to show you a video clip. And what are the goals? So the people that care for the bird on a daily basis would like to be able to enter the enclosure, the habitat, and be able to service the enclosure, and hopefully the bird would remain calm and relaxed while keepers are in the space with the bird so that they can service the enclosure. And then there's also an interpretive team, an educational team that would like to be able to interact with the bird, maybe have it do a few behaviors, maybe go from point A to point B, hop up on a stump, and they don't necessarily have to have the person that's interacting with the bird talk to the guests. Maybe somebody else can be outside the enclosure and talk to the guests, but they would like to be able to do some type of interpretive event with the bird while guests are present, and have the bird again, interact calmly, be relaxed and calm, and ideally, no evidence of this wing slapping behavior. So that's the background, and I'm going to show you a video clip. It's about 4 minutes long. There is some audio on it, which may give away some information, but it doesn't necessarily, give you a solution. So we still have questions to ask. So I'll let you watch the video, and then we'll talk a little bit more. And I would look forward to some of your comments after we watch the video. So let's watch the video first.
What are you feeding him?
Kind of acts like this.
Okay. What are you feeding him?
Pellets and seeds.
What kind of seeds are you eating?
Just various kind of bird seed. There's some corn and stuff like that.
Look at it's happy. What kind of looks like peacock. Like the top.
So it looks pretty okay, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a second when she jumped up, she had her wings up.
Right. Could be a precursor, but not a big one, because it seems like she does the one wing when she's more inclined. I probably will. And normally you wouldn't hang out there for very long, right?
No,
You just do a
no.
job and go. So, and I may let you go ahead and do that because I don't want to set you up for having her do something bad. So.
Hi.
Okay. All right. Well, that looks fine.
Yeah, see, it's not a all the time thing. Or
Right.
at least for me.
Right.
But I don't know.
Well, now she may start to
She's gonna
misbehave.
come over and check out my boots.
Okay.
She likes doing that.
Oh, there it is. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, at least we got to see.
And now you have to come over and check out my boots.
Okay. I wonder if it's just kind of a territorial thing.
Because there wasn't any food over there.
Yeah. And that's the typical, what it typically looks like, we think, of what she did with probably with Emma too.
Probably.
Yeah. A scary light thing happened. It was pretty fast too when she does it, right? So now's probably a good time to leave when she's not at you doing bad things.
She's a weird bird. She's very much, I have to know what you're doing at all times.
Yeah.
But then,
I don't want her to think that slapping is the way to get you to go. But
Okay, so for those of you that just joined us, I'll kind of repeat a little bit here because I see we've got some more people that have hopped on. So what we're looking at is in that video, you had an opportunity to see the undesired response, and we've got this blue crown pigeon. It's an imprinted mature crown pigeon, and the undesired response is that wing slapping behavior. And our goals is the keeper would like to be able to service the enclosure with the bird behaving with calm behavior when keepers are in the enclosure, and also interpreters would like to be in the enclosure and be able to cue the bird to different locations for educational presentations, and also have the bird be calm in the enclosure. So if you remember from our previous live stream, we can ask certain questions about what occasions the behavior. We can ask certain questions about outcomes and contingencies to help us come up with a behavior change plan, a behavior intervention, so that we can help advise the people working with this bird on what they can do to address this particular behavior challenge. So I can play the video again with the audio down as we come up with those questions to ask, and so that we can determine what the conditions are, or maybe at least think of the question, obviously the people aren't here to give us the answers as far as what the conditions are, but at least we can ask some questions. We can think of what those questions might be that we could ask those people. We might be able to get some information just from the video about the contingencies, and then maybe come up with some potential strategies that they might consider. And I can play the video again, but with the audio down while we talk. Let me set that up. I'm gonna put the audio down. There we go. All right. I would ask, what is the function of the behavior in the wild, if there is one? Yeah, so we could look at the ethology of the animal. I think that's a really good question to ask. We could explore some of the natural history of a species and how that might relate to the animal's behavior. Yep. So and I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about what might be the function of the behavior based on what you saw in the video? That is one of our questions, right? So when we talk about outcomes and contingencies, that is part of our exploration. Patricia, what was my, that was her thought. So Lori, that was her thought also. Domestic pigeons slap with wings also when they need more space from each other or caretaker. I don't know if they do that with predators. Distance, yeah. So Gus is on it. Yeah, so one of the things that I think we might, and you kind of heard me say this in the in the video when the audio was on, is that it could be that this bird wants some distance, wants this person to move away, and Chris says it looked to me to be territorial, and you might have heard me say that in the video, that perhaps this was territorial. And again, I don't know if you guys noticed in the description above, when I talked about the background, I said that this is an imprinted mature crowned pigeon. And again, I don't expect everybody to have experience with all these different species that we have in these live streams. But sometimes when certain species are human imprints, they're raised by people, it creates a situation in which we don't know exactly what it is that the animal perceives, but for whatever reason, now humans might be, quote, perceived as, a potential competition for a resource. And so it could be that the pigeon, sees that this human being is now a potential competition for this resource, which is the territory. And by displaying this aggressive response, it might get the desired result of distance, move away from my territory. And in this case, the person did move away, and that might be what has happened in the past. My hand raised, cockatoos can display territorial aggression towards me. So Chris Shank has that experience with her own birds who have been hand raised. Does it happen just during feeding time or other times that they enter the enclosure? Yeah, so that is a really great question to ask, right? So when we go back to our conditions that occasion the behavior, I think that's a really good question to ask. We should start asking some questions about what, remember our questions about what, when, where, who, all those questions that would give us more information about the specific conditions under which this wing slapping behavior occurs is going to be helpful to us. Does this happen with only one person, or all males, all females, all people, etc.? I think that would be a great question to ask. I agree. Because one of the questions that or one piece of information that was given to me was that there's another, it seems to vary between different individual people that enter the enclosure in terms of the frequency of the behavior. And so that's probably a question we would want to explore a little bit more, why there is a difference in frequency in terms of what does each individual person do in response to that maybe is making it more likely to occur with different individuals. What happens before the behavior? All day, few hours, few minutes, few seconds before? Yeah. Also, does movement by the keeper occur right before? Yeah, I think that's also a good question. Are there specific things that the person is doing that make it more likely that the behavior might occur? I think one of the things that we notice in this video clip is the bird pecks at the boots right before. Yeah, even what they're wearing, are the boots shiny, reflective? Patricia makes that comment. Yeah, so yeah, we noticed the bird pecked at the boots right before it did the aggressive response, and I think in a previous experience I had with the bird, I think it has done that pecking at something prior to doing that response. Does presentation of food cause the behavior, or does it show even without food? That would be a good question to explore some more to see if there's any correlation between food and the behavior being emitted. Yep. So it looks like Lori and Chris are both have that question to ask, and I think that also leads to a question about any kind of resource, so to speak. Could it be nesting materials or enrichment items or anything that might be of value, so to speak? Duration of the time the keeper is in the enclosure. I think that's a really good question to ask as well. Yep, I agree. I think that's here, and so it looks like we're about to get to see it happen again here. So we can look for some of our precursors. Oh, there's something. It seems like you told him to leave twice. I think and I think that gives us information right there to support the time idea. Oh, I think you're right. I think I told him to leave earlier before things maybe got bad. Yeah, before she did anything. I might have told him to leave before she did anything, and to support the time idea. And then near the end, does the behavior occur when the keeper just outside the enclosure moving around? Yeah, that is a great question, Al, because I think that gives us information potentially about what is perceived as the territory, because the bird could still emit aggressive behavior even though there's a protective barrier, right? We see that with plenty of other animals. So for the animal, even though there's a mesh that may separate the bird from the person, that gives us information, right? And I think it's interesting, when we watch him leave and go into the keeper catch cage there, to see her response. Was this behavior reinforced by accident, so it got worse because of this? So I think that's why it's really important to identify the contingencies. So, and I think Gus made a good point when he said, is distance the reinforcer, right? So if people are removing themselves the moment that the bird emits this behavior, then the bird is potentially getting the consequence that it seeks. That could be the functional reinforcer. And if that has happened frequently with certain individuals and not with other individuals, then that could account for why some people, the bird emits the behavior more frequently than others, right? Okay, so let's see, I'm missing some things here. Is there other stuff in the environment that would get the bird all amped up some times or all the other times? Yeah, so I think that kind of goes back to that question I had about certain resources potentially might make it more likely. I would try different shoes, but the key to me is distance. You may have to change the goal of being inside and change it to do shaping a station from the outside. So Gus is talking about basically setting up conditions so that the bird can be successful, so that you can reinforce the desired response by giving the bird distance, but doing it in a way that the animal can be successful. So if that means starting from the outside and then gradually transitioning it to inside, you can tell me if I've got that right, Gus. Or a larger enclosure. Well, I suspect she would just turn that into her territory as well. I think her territory would just expand. I think it's still about teaching her what response would work. Okay, thanks, Gus, for the clarification. Yeah, I think it would still, she would still make that her territory, whatever size, whatever space she's living in. So we'd still have to teach what response works, right? Does that make sense? So you guys are asking some really great questions. Is the wing movement while she's eating an early sign of discomfort or normal behavior? So that is a really great question. And I know she did that when she first arrived there when she was very young, but I'm not 100% sure on the interpretation of that. And I think it could change to have other significance. So I'm not comfortable saying I have I can say for sure what that means at this point. Is that one when, someone else is asking if that's part of the behavior or not. So yeah, I don't feel comfortable giving 100% interpretation of what that is at this stage of the game anymore. And I mean, it could have started out as something when she was younger, and now, it's become reinforced as something else. So I don't really have a good answer for you on that one. All right, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this up there because you guys presented a lot of these questions. Does it happen only when people are in the enclosure? Does it happen when people are in the keeper cage? Does it happen when people stay in the enclosure over a certain amount of time? Does it happen when people move in certain ways, touch specific items? Are there certain areas of the enclosure? I don't think we mentioned some of these, like when people bend over or turn their back on the animal, squat. Does it happen when they are not focused on the animal or when a person is talking to guests? Because we thought that might be some of the conditions. And one of the things that we haven't talked about is that there can be multiple conditions under which it occurs, right? The animal could have learned that, all these things are potential situations in which the animal might do the undesired response. And then the possible maintaining contingencies and outcomes. I agree that I think distance is likely the functional reinforcer here, that the slap has worked to remove an aversive stimulus. And I tend to agree that potentially driving a person out of a perceived territory is likely a maintaining contingency. The animal has established the space as a territory, which again involves the ethology of the species, and again, it's kind of a modal action pattern here, and that imprinting being a human imprint may play a role, and again, another factor, and that people that enter territories may be viewed as competition for this resource. So again, there could be other factors as well. And I think it varies depending on the reinforcement history with different individuals. I think it's been more successful with different people. Unless you have a separate room where you did the interactions and educations and only did that, giving the room stimulus control over the desired behaviors. Yeah, and that's a good point. So this space itself, she's got the reinforcement history built up here in this space as well, right? Yeah. And she did live someplace else prior to this, but now this space is all connected to this behavior as well. Would that make sense? And tell me if that's what you're thinking, if that's also along the lines of what you're thinking. Yeah. Yeah, so I think if that's what you're saying, Gus, is like starting over, so to speak, in a new space in which that response doesn't have reinforcement history at all, and so you basically teach her the new response which will work to get people to move away in an entire new space. I'm confused about the imprinting. Does that mean that only one person is desirable? No. So when an animal is imprinted on humans, basically, I think, for sort of a simplistic explanation, it's more like a human is the same species. And so when we think about modal action patterns, so again, when we think modal action pattern, it's just a behavior that doesn't have to have prior learning history to be admitted, but again, it's modifiable by learning history, and so for her, that behavior of defending a territory doesn't have to have prior learning history to be admitted, and so another bird would be the other animal that she would defend, that she would show aggressive behavior towards if they entered her territory. But because she's a human imprint, another human would be that other animal that she would say, okay, you need to get out of my territory. That other animal would be the person through which she would say, get out of my territory. So as she reaches sexual maturity, any other person coming into her territory would be like, oh, sorry, you need to be driven out. I need to show aggressive responses towards you to get you to move out of my territory. So we see a lot of animals that are imprinted on humans show these behaviors that they normally wouldn't show towards, the species that they're imprinted on, directed towards that species, when it should be directed towards the same species that they are, so towards conspecifics, if that makes sense. So obviously they can be influenced by learning, which is what we can do here, is we can change that by teaching her that you don't have to show aggressive responses to get us to go away. We can teach you that it's okay to just chill and we'll go away, right? So that's what we discussed. So our possible strategies is, of course, we can identify the many possible conditions in which is more likely a wing slap will occur, and we can obviously try to avoid those if possible. So that might mean before we enter the enclosure, we be prepared with a plan on how to move, how to engage, how to interact, and reinforce desired responses. So, if you know that, crouching down, or if she's standing by your boots, that, well, shoot, maybe I should walk the other way, give her space. I don't have to walk right up to her. If she's approaching me, maybe I walk the other way, pick up some things in this area, do her food bowl, or go to a different part of her enclosure and maybe just not be so close to her. Don't stand right next to her for long periods of time. Whatever those things are that we know are precursors to aggressive behavior. And we can reinforce calm responses by just moving away from her. We know that she wants distance, right? So we provide that functional reinforcer before the undesired response is observed. And I know people want to know, can I use positive reinforcement? Well, I guess, but we have to identify those contingencies and outcomes. And to be quite honest, and in my experience in general with crown pigeons is, they'll respond to peanuts and things like that, but generally they're usually not a part of their diet just because of health reasons. And honestly, most of them that I've seen, they don't, get super excited about a lot of new stuff. And if we know that, putting certain resources in there might elicit an aggressive response, I don't know. Do we really want to, put something in there that might create conditions that cause her to show these territorial responses? I mean, I don't know. It's not the functional reinforcer, so to me, it might make more problems than help things. But you could consider, oh, well, here's a little enrichment item. Maybe it's a little pile of leaves or something, or maybe it's, some strands of grasses or a little bit of browse, even though all she'd probably do is flick it around. It's not that she's going to eat it or anything. But you could consider that. And if a slap does occur, like we saw, if possible, I would recommend sort of pausing and waiting for a desired response. And like what we saw there in that video, the bird walked away, and that's a really great time to move yourself away from the bird. And then take note of what the conditions were that occasioned the undesired response so that those can be avoided in the future. I mean, we are fortunate. It's a bird that, yeah, they can hit hard, but, it's not like you're working with a really super, potentially dangerous animal. But and ideally, we don't want to be in the situation where the bird does slap, and there's a lot you can do to avoid that. But the less that behavior gains reinforcement history, the better. So those were some strategies that we talked about. All right, so let's try another one. And this time I don't have so many details written out, but let's talk about a sloth. We're going to talk about training a sloth for nail trimming. So the background on this animal, it's a new behavior. The animal is receptive to touch. It does come down and eat its diet from the keeper daily, and it is receptive to two people in the space, if that matters or not. And I'm just going to show you a video clip, and then I'll let you ask some questions because sloths may be new to all of you. You're going to see that the nails are long, and the main reason they want to train is just to make it a little easier for her to eat and stuff. It's not a dire emergency or anything like that, but it's just a behavior goal. So it's a short video, and I'll just let you enjoy a cute sloth.
Oh, she's actually
yeah, we've got a good girl.
very nice.
Yeah, let's do it. All the way in, please.
Well,
And then she's like, but I know you put this food out, which means I can cut for the height. Is no locking in right now? At the door. Alright, you're right there, so you're right there at some point where we don't have to do that.
right. All right.
So then I'd be like, touch,
Right. Okay.
touch, touch,
Okay.
touch, touch,
Well, that's nice. She doesn't seem reactive to that at all.
touch,
And you're putting some pressure on there.
touch.
That's great.
Okay. So I think I'll just let the video play. And is your question about the sloth here? How will you start your possible strategies? Where do you start? Yeah. So this is more about, what kind of questions would you want to ask to get started on this new goal behavior to help develop a plan here. Knowing this much information. Have you decided, will you be using clippers, file, or Dremel? Yeah. So what, based on what you're looking at there, what of these would be best for your animal? I think that's a really great question. Yep. So so for me, and maybe, you know, I know Al has experience with sloths, and based on the how many times a year does it need a trim? Yeah, so those are all great questions. Yeah, so those are good questions. So how's our time? How much information do I give up right away? All right, so because based on the information I received from the caregiver, they decided that they would prefer to clip versus use a Dremel. So that impacted some of our discussion, and because this animal I believe she might be scheduled for an annual exam coming up relatively soon. And so because of that, one of the options is that when she gets her annual exam, they typically do a light sedation for that. And so there is the potential that the veterinarian can do the trimming under sedation, and that will give them some time to then train the behavior, you know, while her nails are already done. And then they can have more time to just, you know, train for nail trims, taking their time to do it. So there's no pressing need to do anything quickly or anything like that. So that's, yeah. So if that's helpful for anybody. Best time of the day to start with a sloth. So I'm trying to think what time of day we were there to do her feeding. And I believe this was a morning session. But I believe this sloth eats her food from the keeper every day. And so I think what the keeper does is she basically kind of looks and keeps an eye out for when the animal is looking like she's ready to eat. And she literally voluntarily loads herself into this little kind of side enclosure, and then the keeper hand feeds her. And that is because there are primates in this enclosure, and if she were to just leave the food, they would eat all her food. So she has learned to come over for her diet every day. So I don't know that there's a specific time of day, but she does eat. She gets hand fed every day, which works out great for training. I see too much about beginning to train nail trimming when the nails are already too long. Well, in this case, like I said, they have some options. Does she tolerate touch without food as a possible distraction? So I think what they are able to do, though, is I think they'll be able to quickly transition to touch and feeding after if they want to. I don't think that's going to be too much of a deal. Do we need to set up the environment to have the best possible access to the nails? It looks like where she hangs out there is pretty accessible for in that space there. Like they don't, you know, she comes in pretty easily and sticks around. Favorite reinforcer. Yeah, she was responsive to quite a few things in the so I guess we're asking contingencies there, and outcomes. So she was responsible to several things that were included in the diet there. So we would be using a contrived reinforcer, and there were several things in the diet that were of interest to her. What's the sloths think about nail clippers now? Is there a need to introduce them? Yeah, they would need to introduce nail clippers. She is not familiar with them at this stage. So if we were to, okay, so you guys, I think, are asking about some of the whats and the who. I guess we asked some whens and who. Let's see, that train target with its nails into a small cup. Eventually transition to a hole in the cup so you can touch nails with clippers and shape it all the way to trim. Maybe plan how to clip the nails on the hand she is using to eat. So I guess people are kind of thinking about shaping plans. It doesn't seem to be a huge challenge at this point. The sloth doesn't seem to care. Yeah, she is pretty receptive to the touch. But and I imagine other people here have trained nail trimming before. I mean, what are some things that maybe you worry about when you're trimming nails so that it doesn't break down? Those are the things I was thinking about. Or what are things that are really important to you in your shaping plan? I mean, it looks like we've identified we're going to try to use a positive reinforcement contingency, but we also want to make sure there isn't an aversive event so that we don't have a negative reinforcement contingency and the animal says, I want to escape or avoid this. So how might we address that? How the animal moves in response to the trimmers. Pain, yeah. So I think those are all really good ones. So we might want to have a really good, careful plan, like someone said, about how we introduce introduce the clippers. And you never want to accidentally cause pain. So what are some strategies you might use to avoid creating a painful event? Not to take too big steps so the animal doesn't get scared at any point. Personally, I would use a file and use it daily or almost daily. Okay. Does anybody, if you were to use clippers, does anybody have any specific strategies they do with clippers that are helpful? Small pieces, yeah, so maybe just tip, doing the very, very tip. Clip the air near the nail, yeah, so maybe, getting him used to the movement. Clipping is good for the situation to get to a good length and Dremel for maintenance. Yeah. All right, well, I think I'll go to my slide here. Keeping the guard piece across the cutting edges so you accidentally don't take too much. Yeah, so some things that I usually recommend to people is, first of all, we got to get suitable clippers, right? I mean, you saw those nails. They're pretty thick, and some of the species we work with in the zoo community, they're, the tools that are out there for companion animals don't necessarily work for zoo animals. Like when we went to Indonesia and tried to bring supplies for orangutans, the nail clippers that exist, in the human and the animal world don't work on those animals. So you have to go to hardware stores and get things that will work. So they're going to investigate. They're going to look at dog nail clippers, but we don't know if they're going to do the job. Yep, they need to be very, very sharp. Exactly. So one of the things we talked about is, measuring the diameter of those nails and maybe going to hardware stores and maybe getting cable cutters and making sure they are super, super sharp. It should be like they shouldn't have to use so much pressure to cut the nail, and they also need to put pressure all the way around. They shouldn't put pressure from just one side of the nail to really cut well. And also so that they should fully encircle the nail. And we also talked about like one hand should hold the nail and the other hand should hold the clippers. So you're not cutting the nail as it's kind of in the air. One hand is holding that nail really steady while the clipper is clipping the nail. And you can also do kind of a pinch cut. to kind of see how the animal is responding before you actually do the cut. And of course, as you guys you guys talked about, you can just tip the very tip of the nail so that you make sure you're not hitting any quick, or nerves. But what the veterinarian told the animal caregiver is that she was able to identify exactly where the nerve ending and the blood supply was on the sloth, and was showing her certain grooves and whatnot on the nail. I didn't see it myself, but the veterinarian was able to point that out for her, so she was able to identify exactly where that is. Also, a cue that starts the procedure as part of the program. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Some signal that says it's about to happen. We do that a lot with injection training. And as you guys have, I know very well, we don't have to trim all the nails in one session. You can do one nail a session if you want. And again, as was discussed, if there is any sedation in the future, like for an annual exam, nails can be trimmed under sedation to allow more time to train the behavior. So those are some things that might make it less likely that there's going to be any response to any kind of aversive event that could potentially be involved, or that we can reduce the likelihood that there's any negative reinforcement contingencies that might happen there. And of course, all of our other steps that you guys know about in creating this as a procedure that's going to be hopefully highly reinforcing on the positive reinforcement end. So those are some things. There's obviously all these other things that we could discuss on it, but I'm trying to be aware of time and all these other things. So, all right, let's look at another one before we run out of time. So we've got a diabetic lemur that I think we saw in our hitting the quick. Yeah, we don't want to hit the quick, make that aversive. And now we've got a negative reinforcement contingency to contend with, and your behavior is going to break down. And that's what this next example is all about. So in this background, this is the diabetic lemur that I had posted a video clip of this one getting an injection of its daily insulin. But every once in a while, this lemur needs to go to the vet. I shouldn't say every once in a while. It's about every 3 weeks. So she has been trained to go into a crate. You'll see it's a wire crate, because the wire crate is then placed in an induction box, for those of you that don't know what that is. So that is a plastic box where then she gets a little bit of an inhaled sedative, and then she can, lightly sedated, where they can draw blood on her and check her glucose levels. So this happens about every 3 weeks. And so they currently use the voluntary crating into the wire crate, and she's then brought to the veterinary hospital on their zoo grounds. And then she'll be transferred into a different crate where she's brought back to her home enclosure, and so she'll wake up in the other crate, and when she's fully awake, she's brought back to her home enclosure. And so even though that's really very a very less stressful way to have blood sampling done for a smaller animal like this. After having blood drawn, after that sedation, it has required some retraining, but not a whole lot. And what the folks there really want to figure out is how can they really kind of ensure that this behavior doesn't break down. And so I'll just show you what the crate behavior looked like when I was there. I mean, she did just fine. But we'll just kind of brainstorm a little bit how to, what they can further do maybe to avoid behavior breakdown. Okay, so there you go. I'm not giving you a whole lot of information, but I'll try to answer questions if I can. Any thoughts about? Okay, it doesn't seem like it bothered the animal, but some animals don't really like their tails touched. But I understand that the crate can't be bigger because of the incubator. Yes, right. With the light sedation, can they use food reinforcers? Yeah, so these days, my understanding is that some of the vet professionals I've worked for, they can use a little bit of a reinforcer, and I think some are okay, if it's like a little bit of liquid reinforcer. So is there a problem with food delivery? Yeah, not so much. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, and the tail touch seems not to bother her, so I don't think it's, and of course they can't really they can't go with a bigger crate just because of if the container that the wire crate goes into gets bigger, then you're having to use more of the the gas for sedation, and that just gets more problematic. If they want the lemur to really go inside the crate, they should use the crate as a floor target. I'm not sure if I understand that. You may have to elaborate for me, Gus, and reward outside the crate, not inside. I'm not sure I understand. Matt? Oh, I don't know. I still don't know if I understand that. Is the crate handled, lifted, shaken during training, or only with the blood test day? Okay. And this ties in with how often does she go to the vet after getting in the cage as opposed to just fun training session. Yeah, so, and the bottom of the crate wobbly, some animals don't like that. Yeah, so I think, so this is one of the things, I'll call this sort of the reality check. So one of the things, of course, is that once she's loaded into the crate, the day that it's going to be for the blood or the sedation and the blood draw means that the crate will be moved out of the enclosure, and there will be transport involved, and that it does mean going to the hospital. So there is a very different stimulus picture on that day, and yeah, you're right, that is different. And I will say that it does take quite a bit of time and effort for that, and this is a smaller facility in terms of staffing. And if I were to say reality check, I would say, while that sounds like a great idea, I think the reality of making that happen, adding that step in of, we're going to also do fun visits to the veterinary clinic, I think the reality of that happening is probably pretty unlikely. Okay. Lemur goes inside, you click, and then reinforce outside the crate. Okay. Operating behavior will make the lemur want to go inside the crate. Okay, I see what you're saying now, Gus. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Although she seems okay with the crate. Because she'll even remain in the crate. Yeah. Maybe just move around sometimes and not go anywhere. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I think they would do that. I think they'd be willing to do that. I get you there. Yep. I think moving her around just inside the enclosure they would do. I think taking the time to go down to the vet clinic would be a challenge. Is blood draw possible without sedation? Again, I think that would probably be more time consuming and challenging in terms of training wise, but that does lead to the question of is monitoring blood glucose levels possible without a blood draw? I mean, that's another question to ask. Could train her to turn to face the door and close the door herself? Yeah, I mean, that's possible, although I don't think she has an issue with going in the crate. I don't think going in the crate is necessarily a problem. I mean, she seemed, like you saw, even after the person leaves, she's still hanging out in the crate. So it's not that so much. I think it's what happens potentially afterwards. So I think maybe, walking her around even inside the enclosure might be a nice idea. I think that has some potential. So those are all good ideas. All right. Okay, so I'm going to, just because we're starting to run out of time again, as usual, I'm going to just show a couple of things that we discussed that are a little outside the box in terms of, comment, is it important where and in what crate she's brought afterwards? I do think so. And we do this a lot with animals, because it's a different stimulus, kind of like what Gus was talking about with the pigeon. If we can, if actually, if there was anything aversive associated with whatever happened at the veterinary clinic, if we can disconnect that from this crate, I think there's value in that. So if waking up in the other crate is and being brought back in that other crate helps make that disconnection, I think that is helpful. so I do like it when people do that. Okay, so let me go back to my lemur slide here. So these are probably some things that might not have been thought about, but these are things that I think about. So could it be possible that she gets a little pre-transport sedation? And this is some things that, you guys may have thought about with your companion animals. And could that pre-transport sedation be the kind that has a little bit of an amnesia effect? And even the sedation that she gets at the clinic, could it include sedation that has an amnesia effect? So some of you may be familiar with midazolam, which is used fairly frequently now in veterinary medicine, and that does have a bit of an amnesia effect. So on those days when it is actually going to be going to the veterinary clinic and getting blood drawn, use of those kinds of sedatives may be useful, and it may, and I don't know if that is what their veterinary professionals are using in any of their work right now, and they may be, and that may be why the behavior is being relatively maintained. We don't know, and they were going to explore that a little bit. But those are questions for the veterinarians, and their veterinarians are great at working with them to explore those kinds of options, so they're going to ask about that. And then, one thing that's being explored with some animals in zoos now is glucose monitoring with the kind of implants that are being used on humans. I don't know if it's been done on an animal as small as a lemur. I do work with a facility that has a gibbon that has a glucose monitor. So maybe we can create the situation where this kind of testing doesn't even have to be done. There was one facility I know of that was doing urine that had trained an animal to urinate on cue and then was doing testing with the urine. But I think more facilities are I think the veterinarians prefer the blood testing as a more accurate test. And as I was saying, more training for transport to the hospital is a little less likely due to the time and the staffing requirements, and also because she is diabetic, the food that is used for training is highly restricted. So that also presents some challenges. But I did like the idea of just moving her around inside the enclosure. I think that's a good idea as well. So I know those might not have been things that come to people's minds off the top of your head, but the way that we kind of get to those kinds of solutions is also having a rapport with our colleagues that work in different disciplines. These often lead us to some really great solutions that we can consider in our plans as well, some of our shaping plans. So it's not always just about training, it's also about looking at some of these other options as well. So, but again, this is why we're always seeking information, always seeking information. So these are some things that we considered as well when we were talking about this lemur. So there you go, some additional ideas to consider. All right, and look at that. We actually got all 3 in before noon. So to kind of recap, it's tempting to dive right in with a solution for a behavior problem or an idea on how to train a behavior when a scenario is presented. However, in our little chats here, we can better serve our animals and clients when we ask some questions and identify the specific circumstances that pertain to that behavior. This allows us to make some adjustments that are laser focused on addressing that behavior with that individual under those conditions. Furthermore, it helps us to move towards functional reinforcers that are maintaining behaviors, especially for undesired behaviors. This is important so that we avoid superimposition, which we've talked about before, and give the animal exactly what it is seeking when it is emitting those undesired responses. However, instead we provide the functional reinforcer for a behavior that is more suitable. Practice, experience, and collaboration with experts in different disciplines also helps us learn additional ways we can improve our process to create better behavior change plans. These include things like identifying the perfect nail clippers, or just where to trim on a sloth's toes nails, or what sedatives have an amnesia effect. Remember to ask colleagues such as veterinary professionals or species experts for their input. Learning from each other is an ongoing process. All right, and a reminder, we've got more resources for you. Oh, my dog has something to say. In animaltrainingfundamentals.com. The Big for Animals document that anybody can access. That's at bigforanimals.com. And then remember, last week's live stream is that solving behavior problems by asking more questions. That one is available also. And then, oh my gosh, next week, it's all happening, as they say. You can go to the CAWT conference, caawt.com, and look for the conference tab. And I'm going to be talking about training herds of animals, especially those ones that are showing fear responses, and other hoof stock too. So antelopes and other herds. Other hoof stock. So I'm excited about this one. This one we've been working on for a while, so it's exciting that it's finally here. And there are special discounts for people that work in all sorts of different kinds of facilities. So if you are if you're trying to save some money right now, this is a really great learning opportunity. And Joe Lang is going to be speaking, and Jesus Rosales Ruiz, and Sean Will, and Masa Nishimuta. So really great lineup and really great topics. And then after that, I will be at the 10th Annual Ethics and Professional Practice Conference, and I'm very excited about that conference as well. It's also online and in person. And again, you can see some really interesting speakers at that one as well. More behavior science for you. And I don't think I mentioned this last time, but I did a podcast with Hillary Hankey from avianbehavior.org, and really fun conversation with her. And you might have noticed I posted a video of getting to hang out with her birds all day and watching birds fly, so that was really fun. And speaking of flying birds, training birds of prey without equipment, I just want to remind everybody about this goats presentation coming up late August with Thomas Anderson. So groundbreaking stuff that folks weren't ready for back in 2009, but it sounds like they're ready for it now. So go to atfgoats.com to get in on that. And again, it's free for members. So if you're not a member, come on in, join us, and just go to animaltrainingfundamentals.com to become a member. All right, guys, look at that. We didn't do too bad. 12:04. Woohoo! All right. Well, good job. Thank you all for participating and giving your feedback and all your great ideas. Jen says, thanks so much. Love seeing the case studies and the discussion. Have a wonderful day. And thank you from Lori from Finland. And so all fun. It's great having you here, and love your participation and your ideas. And I hope you had some fun looking at some animals that may be different for some of you. familiar for others. I don't know. All right, guys, I appreciate you being here. Thanks from Kimberly. And I look forward to seeing you next week. We should be here next week. So we'll come up with some new stuff to look at. All right. All right. Thanks, Patricia. We'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.